Alright, so I'm going to start out in Chapter 1:7, and basically what I wanted to talk about was this image and how I produced it. Alright, so the image I just showed you was basically this shot, but a few seconds earlier. So I'm going to take a very similar image and give you a general idea of how I got there. Okay, so here is my favorite adjustment in Chapter 1. It's levels. It's where you can tone and color your image, change the contrast, change the balance, change shadow tone, and change highlight tone, mid-tone, everything. It does have an automatic adjustment, but I usually don't use that because I want to get in there and mess it up myself. Okay, so as you can see in the histogram, we've got a lot in the low end. We've got a black and then a dark gray spike and then a little bit of a highlight spike. Basically, I just start by going through the different channels. The clouds are a little flat. They don't have the contrast that I want to see. So what I want to do is build contrast by pushing the top down. You're going to force more contrast in the highlights. So then pulling the bottom up, you're also going to push the contrast, but that's not, I don't want to quite go that far. If you look at the humps, you got two humps in the histogram. The far left one in the black is the trees, and the next one over is basically the dark in the clouds. And I want to try to leave this kind of halo solar flare. So you can see we pushed the red up, which made it look more blue-green because we left red out of this area. We took the red out of here. Red stops here. There's no red down here, and there's no red up here. So we can do the same thing. I don't want to blow out too much of that highlight there, so I'm going to stop it. And I'm going to go about the same spot. I want to go in that valley right there. I want to keep that detail because that's the trees right there. The clouds start right there. Blue. Now if you pull them all to the same, you'll basically gray them out. But so to have color, you have to have one that's different. So if I pull them all to 235, it'll basically be neutral to what the original was. So now you see we're really starting to get some contrast in there. All right, so I'm getting about what I want with the solar flare. Okay, so I can pull the mid-tone now. Let's see what we're going to get. Okay, I want to leave a little bit of that red-orange coming through. So normally I don't mess with the green too much because it pushes that magenta really hard, and I don't want to do that in a sunset. Sometimes it's good in the clouds. And this is completely subjective. You can do whatever you want with it. All right, I'm going to start there, and I'm going to go back to the RGB channel, which pushes and pulls every channel evenly. So I can pull the black up, and it's going to push all the detail in the clouds. It's going to, you can see them start to go from basically a dark gray all the way to black. Now what I want to do is I want to pull some of that shadow detail out, so it'll give me a little more latitude. Yeah, so now you can see we're really starting to get some contrast and depth in the clouds, and that's where 3D depth comes from, is good solid contrast. That's looking pretty pretty dramatic. And we've got a very, very orange red sky, and I love how now they have a lot of contrast. You can really see the haze because it stands out from the clouds now. Before it was kind of flat, and I like how you've got good separation with the trees with that kind of haze behind them. This is a little blown out here. I can turn on the highlight warning, and yeah, all that's clipped a little bit. So what we'll do is we'll go in individually, adjust that down just to bring back a little bit of detail, but for the most part I like it. And that's very simple. That's just with levels. We adjusted the contrast, we adjusted the toning and everything with one adjustment. I did pull shadow detail out to flatten out the image a tad so that I could pump more contrast into it. Not to mention that the D600 clips, it compresses the files just a little bit, so you have to pull the shadows out a little bit if you want to get more dramatic range. Okay, so I can continue playing with this, but you know what, I don't want to push that the highs out too much. But it's pretty cool where we're getting really, really quickly. But I want it to adjust the red just a little bit. Something like that. All right, now basically what I'm looking at right here is the banding. I'm blowing it out a little more than I really want to. Part of that is to get the color that I want, but I can fix that. I can go push the other channels, and you'll see that I'm pushing the blue around, and you'll notice it's purple and green. But I can get a pretty cool tone in the clouds there. What I like to do usually when I'm doing this is go a little too far whenever I do an adjustment so that I can come back and find out where the edge is so I know how far I can push it. That's really cool right there. And it's not perfect, but because I don't like how it's blowing out and crushing the blacks all the way in the edge. But what I can do is, and actually, you know what, I believe I did this in the other image. So we're going to switch over to the adjustment layers. I'm going to add a layer. I don't want to adjust on the background. I want to start a new layer. And I'm going to pull down the exposure a little bit on that, making sure I'm in the draw mask. Right click so I can make the brush a little bit bigger. I've got it on auto mask. Probably going to turn that off. And I always turn opacity all the way up to start so that I can turn it down here in the actual adjustments if I need to. So what I want to do, highlight warning, I want to paint the red. That's pretty much all I want to do. So we're going to paint in red. And I want it to still look natural. I don't want it to be too harsh, so something like that. Really simple, really basic, just to level it out. I know it's still clipping a little bit. Let's see where it's not. Yeah, and that just doesn't look good. So I'm just going to balance it out a little bit. Something like that. Okay. One more layer. I'm going to switch it to gradient. Pull a gradient down. Now, let's see what clarity does. Usually it pumps up the contrast a little bit. Go all the way, which is too far. And then structure a little bit. I'll show you what structure does. Alright, so we'll reset those. Alright. Okay. So we pull clarity up with the intention of only going a little bit. I don't want to overdo it. Okay, structure gives you just a little bit of edge enhancement. But you can go too far and you'll get a little bit of noise, and that's when I stop. That's too far. You can see you're actually getting noise in there, and I don't like adding noise. Okay. Now let's back out. So really good depth, really good contrast. I like the starburst there, the solar flare. Let's see, all we did, pulled a little bit of shadow detail out, adjusted the levels so we can add contrast and tone it so that we could push the orange in the clouds or in the sun below the clouds, and then the kind of bluish in the clouds, just to give it a little color contrast. And then just the selective adjustments to pull down the slightly overexposed area around the sun, just to balance it out a little bit. And then an overall adjustment on the clouds for clarity. Now the last thing is in the focus tool. I like to go to 100. Now this is where I like to sharpen it. You can see how on 0 it's a little bit fuzzy because it didn't focus perfectly. There we go. Starting to clear up. The focus didn't hit perfectly on the clouds. It hit on the trees. But that's pretty good. It's a small tweak, but I think it's worth it. Okay, so you know what? For a quick edit, I like it. So that's levels in Capture 1. Really simple, really powerful. We did basically everything you can do in the exposure bar. You believe it or not, when you're moving the levels, you actually are changing saturation. When you darken a color, the saturation technically is going up. But that's we'll talk about that another time. So yeah, if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments and I'll try to get back with you. But yeah, jump in with this and play with it because it's very, very powerful, and I don't think any other software does it this well. If so, I haven't seen it. Anyway, that is all for now.